Thank you, Sue. By way of introduction, I want to take you back to August last year. I was sat in my lounge writing my application for the post of Chief Executive of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, and I received a letter from the then chair, Helena Johnson, inviting me to give the centenary Founders Lecture at the 2014 Physiotherapy Scientific Conference. And I promptly burst into tears. And I know exactly why. At that moment, it really dawned on me how much I really did want the job. Up until that point, I'd been pretty ambivalent about it, but suddenly I really wanted to be part of the leadership team that would take this profession to where I believe it should be. And I realised that this application really mattered, and I wanted to go all out to get this job. It was also because I couldn't quite believe that I, Karen Middleton, had been offered this privilege, particularly in the centenary year of the instigation of the lecture. I've sat where you're sitting, and I've listened to many fantastic speakers give this Founders Lecture. Sir Steve Redgrave, John McCarthy, Jill Hicks, and of course, last year, the absolute tour de force from Dr. Emma Stokes. I mean, how do you follow that? But the main reason that I felt so emotional is because I am a physiotherapist. I owe this profession a huge debt of gratitude, and therefore its founders. For all the fantastic experiences I've had in my career, for all the opportunities, for all the brilliant people that I've worked with, and yes, all the fun that I have had. I have learnt so much about people, about life, and about myself through my profession, and I'm still learning. And so to have the privilege of giving this lecture dedicated to our founders is an emotional one. And for that reason, I can tell you that I'm going to cling on to this lectern and my notes for dear life. It's personal. I've never thought about a presentation or a lecture as much as I ever have this one. I had a small team of CSP staff who helped me with the history, the design, the technology, and the thinking. Linda, Nikki, Triss, Steve, and Kieran, thank you. Yet another example in my life of what a small and crucially diverse team can achieve together. So what I want to talk to you about is leadership, and Rob's given a really great lead in there. Those of you who know me know this is a long-held fascination, and I'm passionate about how good leadership transforms lives. I want to tell you a little about two of our founders, Rosalind and Lucy Robinson, and what they did for us, you and me. I want to tell you about them as leaders, and I want to reflect on how far our profession has come over the last 100 years as a result of other leaders in our profession. Then I want to share with you some of the leadership lessons I have learnt. I hope there will be some that resonate with you and that you can take away, but also leave some for future in-person columns that I do in Frontline. Lastly, I want to look at the future of our profession and what we need in terms of leadership. But first, I want to give you a health warning. I am passionate about our profession, its success, its profile, and its ability to influence. You have my absolute assurance of that. But when I talk about the success of the profession, I am not, and never have been, interested in its success for success' sake, for the profession's sake. This is self-interested and egotistical. I'm interested in the success of our profession because of the difference it can make to people's lives. The difference that you make every single day, that's why the success of our profession is important. And so to Rosalind and Lucy, two of our founders. In 1894, when our profession was founded, it was the Victorian age, a time of austerity, 50 years before the NHS was created, and long before women would get the vote. That summer, the air was thick with scandal. The press and the medical journals were publishing articles about the massage scandals, where unsavoury establishments were cropping up, pretending to be nursing homes, and nurses were being enticed to work in them on the pretext of giving massage to patients. Rosalind and Lucy both practiced massage, or medical rubbing, as it was known then. They were passionate about its value as part of the medical toolbox. They were worried that if action wasn't taken, the cloud of scandal would drive therapeutic massage outside medical science. They needed to take action, and they needed to do it quickly. Lucy suggested creating a society, and the Society of Trained Masseurs was founded. By the autumn, there was a council of 9, and our profession was founded. So what about these two women? They weren't in a position of leadership as such, but they could see what might be ahead. They were passionate about their skill and the difference it could make, and were determined it mustn't be lost. They took action quickly. They did it together, and others followed. They got organised. I think our stewards would be very, very proud of them. All leadership qualities. As for their personalities, they had different strengths and weaknesses. Lucy was passionate and caring. She recognised the need for money and managed to negotiate large sums quickly. And she broke the rules. She wasn't interested in bylaws or statutes. And as someone trying to get to grips with these right now, I must admit I have some sympathy with her. She was always forgiven for breaking the rules because her motives were genuine. Remember that phrase, don't ask permission, just ask for forgiveness later. Rosalind was more authoritative. She had good connections. She recognised early on the need to gain support from the medical profession. And she used her connections well. She was efficient and direct, but she too was compassionate and hated anyone, as she said, bumptious or oversure. Woman after my own heart. So in terms of leadership, Rosalind and Lucy were fearless and brave because they were passionate about what they believed in. But they realised that passion alone was not enough. They needed to get organised, to find money, to network, and to garner support and, crucially, gain influence. The biggest lesson for me, however, from these two women is what can actually be achieved when two people set their mind to something they believe in, particularly two different people, such as Rosalind and Lucy. Now, I don't propose to go through the next 100 years and look at all the key milestones for our profession, as it would take too long. But crucially, behind every single one is a leader, or a group of leaders, who made the profession what it is today, and many of them are likely to be at this conference. I strongly advise you not to be dismissive of any of the more mature ladies and gentlemen that you see at this conference, the great and the good as they're often described. But that's because they are just that. They were the rebels of their time, the leaders who made a difference, and they're here to keep an eye on us to see where we're taking the profession in the future. So some of the highlights over the last 100 years, well, the Pagets grew the profession during World War I. The development of rehabilitation after World War II was led by Olive Guthrie-Smith. We gained clinical autonomy in 1977. We joined the TUC in 1993. In 1994, we welcomed support workers to our society. In 2002, we had the first consultant physiotherapist, Paul Watson. And in 2009, the first doctorate in physiotherapy was awarded to Nicola Petty. And more recently, in 2013, we gained independent prescribing rights for our profession. It's so easy for us, and I've done this, to read about these people and glibly ask, what do they have to do with me and what I'm facing now? To think that it was all right for them, but life is so different now. Well, let me remind you, as I have been reminded, that all the people behind these achievements have been where you are now. They've been swamped by work, they've been limited by resources, they've been ridiculed for their ideas, and they've faced resistance from all sides. But they did it anyway, and look at the difference it made. I can remember not being allowed to speak to a doctor without first going to a nurse, and I'm not that old. I can remember referrals when the doctor, who knew less than I did, told me what and how many treatments to do. I remember telling a doctor what to inject and where and not being allowed to do it myself. And I remember the disadvantage of not being a graduate profession. These people achieved a great deal for our profession and enabled you to practice as you do today, as autonomous clinicians without the need for a referral, to use a biopsychosocial model, able to independently prescribe, and crucially, with a wealth of evidence to support what you do. And remember, because of all of that, you are able to make an even greater difference to people's lives. And so my leadership journey. I doubt that any of these people in our profession's history would describe themselves as great leaders, but I bet all of them would describe something or someone which set them on a road of wanting to make a difference. I can honestly say that making a difference is what brought me to this profession, that and a love of football. And there was one person who sent me on a road that has meant I was able to apply for the chief executive post last year. And that was Mrs. Helen Schaffner, my principal at St Mary's School of Physiotherapy. I had hoped Mrs. Schaffner, and those of you who are around my age will understand, well, I can't possibly call her Helen, would be here today as my special guest. But sadly, she could not. I just wanted to publicly say thank you for what she inspired in me. For apparently not noticing that I didn't have a plum in my accent, like all the other Mary's girls. That I didn't have a set of pearls, or that I was from Essex, but that I did have potential. And you know, I don't think that the educators of our profession get enough thanks from us for what they do and for what they inspire in all of us. They are, after all, the people that start us off in this great profession. They are, for me, the unsung heroes. So in honour of Mrs. Schaffner and all the educators in our profession, could I ask the rest of us to stand and show our appreciation for what they've done for us? And there have been many other people in my career that have inspired me or nurtured me, coached and mentored me, and taught me everything I know. Many of them I have admired so much, I've simply copied them. Why reinvent the wheel if it's already been invented? But what are some of the lessons I've learnt along my leadership journey that may be of use to you at whatever stage you are at? An early lesson was about taking responsibility for my own development, whether clinical or managerial. If you don't nurture yourself, no one else will. This involved taking annual leave to go on courses, funding my own development, and going the extra mile to gain a whole range of different experiences. The minute you stop learning or developing is the time to get on and get out. Every few months, I sit down to reflect on a whole series of questions that I learnt from Stephen Sonsigno's work on leadership. I use these questions to help me think about my development and what I need to do next. And I'm going to go through them because you may find them helpful. The questions are, what are you known for? So what do other people say about you? What do you want to be known for this time next year? Where does your current work and the projects you're working on challenge you? What new things have you learnt in the last 60 days? What important contacts have you made in the last 60 days? And what's your personal visibility plan? What does it look like? What did you add to your CV this year? And what will you add in the next 60 days? And crucially of all, why should anyone be led by you? Another relatively early lesson was don't try to plan too much. Stuff happens in life that can knock you off course, and you need to be flexible in order to respond and also to be able to take advantages of the opportunities that will come your way. When I qualified, my plan was to get to be a superintendent physio, give up work, have children, and go into private practice. Then I got divorced. I needed to be financially secure. I met my new husband, who already had 2 children, and then a secondment opportunity came along to go into project management. Without any of these events, I would not be standing here today. Taking opportunities has been a particular feature of my career, particularly secondment opportunities. All of them have been a bit tenuous, 2 didn't even have a job description, and all have required a great deal of nerve, but more of that later. Working out what level of risk in order to take an opportunity is acceptable for you is crucial. But I think we as physiotherapists have a tendency to like everything written down and sewn up before we take action. My advice is to loosen up, as you will miss out. Learn to live with a bit of messiness and uncertainty, a great leadership lesson that I have to keep relearning. As well as dealing with messiness, learning to act quickly but not rashly, don't overthink, is important. Remember Rosalind and Lucy and their recognition that they needed to act fast. If you don't, you'll miss out. I feel a bit of a fraud here because it's of no surprise to me that in researching our history for this lecture, I discovered that the Founders' Lecture was instigated in 1914, but the first actual lecture wasn't till 1915. They obviously had to have a year to think about it, ponder, plan, and then act it. So now to one of the biggest lessons I want to share with you. I have talked about nerve. What I'm really talking about is courage. Leadership takes guts, and for 2 reasons. Firstly, the guts to take a stand, to say what needs to be said, to speak out when others are silent, or to have a go at something different. This is actually easiest when there's something that matters, when your integrity is at stake, or when it's absolutely the right thing to do. Again, think back to Lucy and Rosalind and why they did what they did. 2 occasions stand out in my career, and on both occasions I was absolutely terrified. The first was when I project managed a user-led review of rehab services in Tower Hamlets for people with severe physical disabilities. Having listened to story after story about what people really wanted from a rehab service, I had to present my recommendations to the board, something I'd never done before. I was terrified, particularly because one of my recommendations was going to be to remove the medical consultant post and replace it with 4 rehab support workers in the community. But I did it. And here's another lesson. I did it because I had the power of the patient voice behind me. Spending 18 months just listening to what people wanted from rehab services actually changed my entire professional life. I learned that what matters most to clinicians isn't necessarily what matters most to patients. But if you do listen and then act on what you hear, nothing nor anyone can hold you back. The second standout occasion for me was telling Sir David Nicholson, the then Chief Executive of the NHS in England, that we needed to start collecting waiting times for community AHP services at a time when all the national targets were being achieved and when we knew that to collect this data would highlight there was a big problem. I'd never met David before, but his reputation went before him. And it was the day before his holiday, so he wanted to get away problem-free. Again, I was terrified. I presented my argument, and as I did so, those in the room visibly moved away from me, as though to say, this is her idea and we're having absolutely nothing to do with it. He responded with an emphatic no. I presented the data. He said no. And then somewhere inside me, I got very angry. and I heard myself say, "So that's all right then, is it? We know children are waiting 18 months to be assessed for speech and language therapy. We know people are in pain waiting for physiotherapy at home. And we know people are stuck at home in one room because they cannot access the equipment they need. And we're just going to do nothing." There was silence. Then David said, "I think you're right. This is unacceptable." And so eventually we got the AHP community data set, which makes this data public today. The second reason you need guts is because everything in your body will tell you that you are not up to it, not up to the task or the job, the imposter syndrome. And of course you believe that someone someday is going to find you out. And also, of course, that everyone else, and I mean everyone, is much more capable than you and clearly knows what they're doing all of the time. Well, let me let you into a secret. They don't. We don't. I don't. We fantasize about everyone else's capabilities, and so we diminish our own, and then we don't act. If you haven't read The Chimp by Steve Peters, read it. Every new job I have started, I have doubted whether I could do it. Most days of the week, I do something which is new and I'm worried about. But over time, what happens is that you get familiar with that feeling and learn to manage it. And you also learn that everyone else is human too, and they don't know it all of the time. In fact, now I get very worried by people who think they do. One of the hardest lessons I've learned is to become more self-aware and appreciate the impact I have on people, whether good or bad. To develop your emotional intelligence is to gain the greatest insight of all. But it can be painful, and it takes, in my experience, significant experiential learning, which is also something that takes guts to embark on. So I learnt from the King's Fund programme that I went on that whereas I thought my high energy, positive, get into action style was really motivating for others, I learnt it could also be deeply irritating. I learnt that I get really frustrated by others taking time to analyse, ponder, reflect, look at the data before taking action. And yet what I learnt was these people who do that have saved me from making some very, very big mistakes. There were many other things I learnt about myself as a leader on that programme and since, but they could be career limiting, and I'm standing here in front of my boss, so I'm not going any further. And lastly, the lesson I've learnt is that you must be yourself. You must be authentic. We can all spot a fake. Be true to yourself and maintain your integrity. No one can take it from you. Only you can give it away. Don't try to be something you're not. Remain humble, whatever success comes your way. There are some leadership gurus, but one that I hold in high esteem, as you can tell, is Stephen Sonsigno, and he talks about leadership in terms of love. To be a leader, taking a stand or speaking up or being passionate is not enough. You need followers, and people need a reason to follow you. But this isn't about some parent-child relationship or creating dependency. This is about empowering people. And I love Stephen's definition of leadership being about, and I quote, exciting others to higher levels of performance. You want people to perform because you care for them. You want to nurture others, to coach and mentor them because you love them. The greatest joy of my leadership journey is to see people I have worked with go on to even greater success. Leadership is about love, and it does have to have a purpose. And so what about the future, the next 100 years? Making predictions is a dangerous game, but I think we can all agree that the pace of change will continue to increase, that healthcare in this country is likely to look more chaotic or at least messy, and that there will never ever be enough money. So where will our profession be in this? Well, in one sense, there couldn't be a better time for our profession. Both Fran and Rob have highlighted this well. We are the profession that can reverse injury, illness, or complaint. We are the profession that can enable people to live with their long-term conditions. We can integrate health and social care. We are the profession that works in the NHS and the private sector, and we return people to work and keep people physically active. And we're really good value too. So what's the problem? The future is obviously rosy. Well, I want to be quite explicit about this and perhaps provocative. I'm not going to stand before you now and tell you what a fabulous future we have and how we will go from strength to strength so that we can all go away with some sort of smug, rosy feeling of contentment that all is well with the world. That's not leadership. No, this is a time for a wake-up call, a reality check and some urgency and a call to action for our profession. Whilst there couldn't be a better time for physiotherapy, how successful it is depends on the action we take or don't take. My greatest fear is that this profession will sleepwalk into obscurity. That's you and I allowing our profession to wither and die. And as I said before, to a great extent, that wouldn't matter if it wasn't for the fact that this would mean hundreds and thousands of people every day, week and month being deprived of what you have to offer them. Never mind the fact that I think the NHS would be bankrupt without our input. I'm not talking about some sudden catastrophic happening, but a slow, almost unnoticeable demise. And that would be even more devastating when in fact this could be a time of real growth for our profession. And for me, the signs are there already. The number of student training places is decreasing. Apparently, there's no demand for posts in the service. At a time when care and compassion take centre stage, we're actually debating as a profession whether we should stop touching, the most fundamental sign we care for another human being. The human genome sequence was released in 2004, 10 years ago. I see no sign of planning for how our practice needs to change or our services alter. We gained clinical autonomy in 1977, and still only those who can pay can routinely expect to self-refer 37 years later. And my personal bugbear, we have hard-earned clinical autonomy, so how dare commissioners and planners decide how many times we see a patient or whether we treat or just give advice. That should be our decision. But if you're sitting there thinking, well, the CSP needs to do more, or the managers should be battling against these decisions, or the policymakers, or anyone else you care to think of, think again. This is down to you, yes, you. Remember that every time you point the finger at someone else, there are 3 pointing back at you. Again and again, I hear the phrase, what they should do. Well, I have been all the theys. I've been a clinician, I've been a manager, I've been a policymaker, and now I'm at the CSP HQ. And I can tell you that there is no one else that's going to do this. There isn't anyone else in another room. It's down to all of us, each and every one of us, to take action now. The profession has done it before. It was founded by 2 women who took action, and look what happened. The profession has adapted again and again over the years to become highly successful and respected. But I think the next 100 years will be the real test. I think it's going to require some tough love, some difficult decisions, and we're going to need to be much more businesslike about what we do and how we work. We will need to harness technology, not fight against it. We have to value the diversity in our profession and see the strength that brings rather than resort to petty squabbles. We need to be able to say the words competition and customer without getting defensive. We need to be bilingual and talk money as well as clinical outcomes. We need more physiotherapists to step up as leaders and do more of what Rosalind and Lucy did and all the others that have shaped our profession since. History is a good predictor of the future. We've done it before and we'll do it again. But don't think this is someone else's job. It's yours. Remember what 2 women achieved, and we are now 52,000. To illustrate my point, I want to play the Dancing Man video.
If you've you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made.
So that was one brave person who stood up. An even braver person that joined that person so that they weren't just a lone nut. And then more joined, and then it became irresistible so that everyone wanted to be part of that movement. I want physiotherapy, I want the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy to be a social movement like that, so that more people can benefit from your offer, your ability to transform lives every single day, your ability to empower people to lead independent lives. My taxi driver yesterday, well, he's not mine, but a taxi driver yesterday, said to me, "You physios are miracle workers. What you do means we don't just exist, we live." Isn't that fantastic? You do that every single day. I also think that physiotherapy as a profession can ensure that the NHS is sustainable in the future. I think that physiotherapy as a profession can make sure that healthcare moves to being more preventative and much more holistic for people. Our profession doesn't only add years to life, we add life to years. And I want to give you a commitment that I will do my very, very best to make sure that this profession continues in the way it has before, but become even more influential and more powerful and stronger as a profession in order to make that difference to the people we serve. I will also pay back the debt that I owe the profession for everything that I have managed to achieve. And I will ensure that the CSP staff give you the tools, the organisational backup to enable you to go out and lead in order that you get your voice heard in all the right places. But the deal is that you have to play your part too. Voltaire said that being good is the enemy of being great. We have to make sure we're not complacent. We need active leaders and we also need active followers, not passive people. You've got to engage in this. You've got to get out there, you've got to be visible, you've got to influence. Remember what 2 women did before they even had the vote. And now imagine what a diverse group of 52,000 can achieve. Our founders played their part. Now it's time for us to play ours. Thank you.